So ladies and gentlemen, I want to welcome you all to the Minority Participation in Infrastructure Conversation with Senator Ben Cardin, sponsored by Career Communications Group and BEA. My name is Matt Bowman. I spent 21 years in the United States Navy flying jets off of aircraft carriers, and I am now the Military and Government Affairs person for Career Communications Group. I'd like to welcome you all to this very important conversation. We have leaders from San Diego, Detroit, Maryland, Florida, and Louisiana who've all submitted questions to the senator as we discuss ways for minorities to participate in a $1.2 trillion historic rebuild of America. All of this takes place in an environment of COVID, where we have BEA has built a STEM city, which is a virtual city, and we have the chair of the Senate Committee on Small Business and also the chair of the Senate Committee on Transportation. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Taborn, and then I'll pick back up later on in the call. Dr. Taborn, sir, the CEO of Career Communications Group, over to you.
Great. Thank you, Matt. Really appreciate that. I know we have about an hour, so I won't take all of that time. I'll leave some for the senator. But I have to tell you, he's my friend, Ben. And I want to say that when I first moved to Baltimore, my two neighbors for 10 to 15 years were both Rabbi Murray Salzman and Bob Rumbo. And they introduced me to the senator back then, all after 10, 15 years. And I've seen what he has done, his passion at the state level, now at the federal level, of being passionate for small business, minority opportunity, and unifying our community in all ways that are so important and necessary. So it was so appropriate as we build STEM City, something that has not ever been done, with the help of Linda Gooden, with the help of one of the founders being the president of the University of Maryland, Dr. Pines, with the help of the Black billionaire David Stewart, with the other 12 founders who saw a vision that we can bring free training, certification, education, tutoring to 8th graders in algebra, that we had a platform out of the pandemic. We could embrace video conferencing and bring it to people in a real way to continue to bridge the digital divide. We have created this STEM city. So today we're still in the building. We're still building the whole city and the whole vision. So we're really excited to host this town hall with the senator, because we're in the infrastructure position. He's in the infrastructure position and doing what's great for the country. So I will tell you just something very quickly about the senator. All of you can go to the website. I would suggest that you go to both websites, his official website and his fundraising website that he won't talk about, but I will tell you, you should do it. The senator is a member of the Small Business and Entrepreneur Committee. He's also one of the leaders in the infrastructure legislation that's coming up, and why and how it's going to impact on us, and with HBCUs, with small business, minority business, and I put both together, small business and minority business. And then finally, on justice, on environmental justice. Infrastructure is one of engineering's greatest challenges, and that's what we're going to deal with. So what we're going to do is show you a quick video on STEM City, and then right after that video, is very quick, right after the STEM City video, we will go to Matt, and the town hall will open with the senator. Senator Cardin, my friend Ben, thank you for gracing us and being part of this very, very historic moment. Quan, over to you.
What if you could build your own city? A place where every child can find nurturing people to help them achieve their full potential. A place where every adult can access job training support, where health education is abundant, where social justice ruled the land. A place without limitations. Welcome You have arrived at STEM City, USA. It is what every city should be. A safe and trusted community where you find people and resources to help you become everything you are and beyond. STEM City is unlike anything you have ever experienced. It is a digital twin of the world around you, only better. STEM City is about energy and soul renewal. It is more than a digital world. You can almost feel the power of live cultural events, music, and theater. STEM City promises a better future for children with caring mentors and hands-on activities with dedicated tutors to support our youth. STEM City is your passport to a healthy lifestyle with weekly events addressing our community's many issues. STEM City is your financial well-being with helpful information on wealth management, career advancement, job training, and so much more. STEM City is the community you deserve. It is the city where your dreams can come true. STEM City USA, a place in the sky that is accessible to all who reach for the stars.
Well, Dr. Taborn, that was a wonderful video. And so what we're going to do now is, now we've talked about the STEM City infrastructure, I'd like to now turn it over to Senator Cardin. And Senator, we'd like to get your remarks to the minority community on the infrastructure bill and how we can participate.
Well, Matt, first of all, thank you very much for your leadership. Thank you for this opportunity for me to participate in a town hall so we can try to answer your questions in regards to what is happening as we speak in the United States Senate. We're negotiating a bipartisan infrastructure bill, but it's also part of a budget reconciliation process and part of President Biden's Build Back Better. So I want to absolutely get involved in a discussion. Dr. Taborn, thank you very much for those very kind remarks, and I very much value your friendship and what you've done with STEM City, what you've done in regards to career communication group. You've really provided opportunities, and it's good to be your partner, and thank you for including me today. And to Reverend Jerome Stevens, who's on this call, my eyes and ears in the community, thank you for your service in our office and for putting together, helping put together this town hall meeting. Just a few minutes ago, as Reverend Stevens knows, Senator Van Hollen and I were pleased to recommend to President Biden, and President Biden announced the appointment of Eric Barron to be the next U.S. Attorney for the state of Maryland. That's an historic appointment. We're very proud of that. We talk about justice and policing, but we want someone to lead our federal team who really is knowledgeable and sensitive as to what we need to do to make sure that our federal partner in the prosecutor's office understands justice in our community. So we're very pleased with that announcement, and it's part of our overall concern about making sure that all communities are served in our state and nation. We do talk about the gap that we have. Before COVID-19, I was working hard to bridge the gap on entrepreneurship as the chair of the Small Business and Entrepreneurship Committee in this Congress, recognizing that there's the wealth gap, the income gap. We need to make sure that opportunities exist in the traditionally underserved communities, and I've made that my priority. One of my mentors in all of this was Parren Mitchell, the former congressman from the 7th Congressional District of Maryland, the first African-American to serve in the Congress from the state of Maryland, who went on to chair the Small Business Committee with the first set-aside for minority businesses he authored. So it's in that tradition that I have patterned my opportunity as leader of that committee to deal with these issues. The current opportunity is Build Back Better. It started with the American Rescue Plan that President Biden was able to get through Congress, one of the most significant bills ever passed by the Congress. It reduced the child poverty rate by 50% by strengthening the earned income tax credit and the child credit. All these were incredibly important tools in order to deal with the wealth gap and income gap and opportunity gap and systemic racism in our society. We also were able to help state and local government. We were able to help our school systems, help get the COVID-19 vaccines distributed. That was part of the American Rescue Plan. The second part is the American Jobs Plan, and that's what we're talking about today, the infrastructure package. But as I talk about this, and as we get into this town hall discussion, recognize that the American Jobs Plan is part of also the third leg, which is the American Family Plan. The American Jobs Plan, the bipartisan infrastructure package, deals with traditional infrastructure, which are our roads, our bridges, our transit systems, our rail systems, our ports, our airports, and broadband. But we also want to deal with the capital infrastructure, and the American Family Plan that will be part of the reconciliation package includes affordable child care, extending the child credit and earned income tax credit, universal pre-K for 3 and 4 year olds, dealing with paid family and medical leave, the issues that have come to light during COVID-19 that has made a circumstance that was where we had a gap even worse as a result of COVID-19. So we have to be aggressive. We have once in a generation opportunity, and we're committed to making that a reality. I chair the infrastructure subcommittee and the Environment and Public Works Committee. We have incorporated an infrastructure bill that does deal with social justice issues. We want to make sure that the minority contractors are able to get the jobs and contracts related to this increase in transportation infrastructure or water infrastructure or broadband. In all those categories, we want to make sure there's a fair sharing in regards to the minority community. We're also dealing with the social justice issues in transportation. We know all too well in Baltimore, where a highway was built against the wishes of a community that divided a community down the Mulberry Street corridor. We want to see that communities reconnected. So we have money put in here for divided communities to repair the damage that was done by irresponsible transportation projects in the past that were not sensitive to underserved and minority communities. We want to make sure that there's a social justice aspect to it. And then lastly, let me tell you what I'm doing in regards to the Small Business Committee. I've made it clear that we're going to target the relief to those that have not been treated fairly, to our underserved communities, to our women-owned small businesses, to our veteran-owned small businesses. I'm proud that I was able to get a women's business center located at Morgan State University so that we have a women's business center to serve the Baltimore community. I was proud that we got our very first veterans support system at College Park that will help our veterans. I am very clearly supported the mission lenders to make sure our CDFIs and MDIs have capacity because they're the ones who will provide credit to minority small businesses. And I'm the author of 2 new initiatives, or 3 new initiatives that we hope to get passed in this Congress. One that was called the Uplift, that would set up partnerships between the government and HBCUs and community colleges to start in minority opportunities for incubator and accelerator programs. I've also authored the Office of Emerging Markets that will allow minority small businesses to be able to get access to venture capital. As you know, if you look at the traditional tools under the SBA, they're not fairly allocated. The African-American business-owned communities are not getting anywhere near their fair share, but in venture capital, it's almost zero. We want to make sure venture capital is available in minority communities. And then I've introduced the bill that would make permanent the Minority Business Development Agency under the Department of Commerce, which is the principal arm in government to help minority small businesses. So there's a lot of opportunity out here that we can talk about, both in the bipartisan infrastructure bill that we hope to have on the floor of the Senate this week, or the American Family Plan, which is the $3.5 trillion reconciliation package, or what's coming out of the Small Business Committee to help minority small businesses. This is a town hall. Where a senator is not supposed to talk too long, which is hard for senators. But I do welcome your questions, your comments. And at this point, Matt, I think I'll turn it back over to you and let's get into a discussion.
Well, Senator, thank you for those remarks. I'm super excited. I'm actually coming to you from outside of Charleston, South Carolina, in a multi-generational family-owned business. We have pictures on the wall of veterans, because a lot of entrepreneurs are veterans and come from the veteran space. Myself, we have a company called Black Construction and Transportation Consortium, and many of the members on this call are part of it. So my first question, sir, and I have a number. Some of these people you'll recognize. Dr. Sean Wilson is the first question. He is the Secretary of Transportation for the state of Louisiana. And we have one coming from Mr. Rick Wade, who was a President Obama advisor. And then we have some coming from Brigadier Generals David Turner, Brigadier General Velma Von Richardson, and your very own Maryland's Michael Steele also has a question that he has provided for you. So you're going to have a bunch of them. So the first one from Dr. Sean Wilson, the Secretary of Transportation for the state of Louisiana. And he says that the effective participation in the infrastructure and the rebuilding of America requires accountability for public funds and objective data-driven metrics to monitor the spending. However, history shows that low participation for African Americans in particular is often masked under the umbrella term minority. So his question is, what objective data and accountability mechanisms can we put in place to ensure that all American citizens, including African Americans, can participate in the infrastructure rebuild of our great nation?
Well, Dr. Wilson, that's a great question. And it's one that I can assure you as chairman of the Small Business Committee, I'm focused on doing this. So I'm going to give you several ways that we're going to make sure there's not only President Biden's directive that we have set aside for minority small businesses, but in fact, they are reaching the underserved communities because we want to make sure that in socially and economically the underserved communities, that's where we concentrate our efforts on helping grow the economic opportunities and entrepreneurship in our community. So our committee will be holding oversight responsibilities, but let me also point out, there's a different team in town. Administrator Guzman, who is the administrator of the Small Business Administration, she understands the commitment. It's not the numbers game, it's whether we're reaching, in fact, the underserved communities. And we recognize that people can play games with numbers, but we're going to be looking at where the businesses are being helped and whether new opportunities are really being made available. We also understand the problems we have with bureaucracies. Bureaucracies, either intentionally or unintentionally, don't really want to reach out the way that we want them to reach out, to give new opportunities for businesses that have been left behind in the past. And we're going to be working very hard. And to make this a reality, we've given the Small Business Administration additional resources for personnel and tools so that they can, in fact, develop the capacity to bring in businesses that have been left behind in the past. So I can assure you, yes, we'll be looking at the numbers. We want to make sure the numbers are fair, but we're looking well beyond the numbers themselves.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. We have some other questions from some state officials in Florida. The Chief of Staff of the Secretary of Transportation of Florida has some questions. We'll email those to your staff. But this second question comes from Mr. Joe Anderson. And Joe comes to you, sir, from Detroit. He is the chair of the Board of Trustees of the Federal Reserve Bank in Chicago. He is a contemporary of General Colin Powell. He has a documentary as a documented soldier, and he's chair and CEO of TAG Holdings, a 25-year participant in the Black Enterprise 100. And his question is, the Federal Reserve is in the process of surveying businesses in Metro Detroit with an emphasis on access to capital. And you mentioned that, sir, as one of the barriers to minority participation. And his question is, in 2021, capital is available in the marketplace for businesses. The challenge for minority businesses is that many of them, due to historical realities, do not have the inherited lands, buildings, or underlying assets to secure capital. How can we make capital more accessible to these Americans by addressing and modifying the traditional governmental policies and procedures that serve as the basis for business loan considerations, especially for capital projects?
Well, let me tell you something, Joe, thank you for that question. You're right on target here. And that came out so clearly during the early days of the pandemic when Congress passed the Paycheck Protection Program, very important program, a program that got money out and saved a lot of small businesses. But guess what? If you didn't have a priority relationship with a bank, you were left behind. And guess what community didn't have the priority relationships with the banks? Yes, it was the underserved minority communities. And we learned that lesson and we took steps to try to correct it. So what did we do? We provided $10 billion to strengthen the capitalization of CDFIs, community development financial institutions, which are located in underserved communities and can reach out. We also gave capacity to minority depository institutions because we know they also are much more likely to reach out in underserved communities. Yes, I'll give a shout out to Harbor Bank in Maryland, a great banking institution, minority depository institution that's done incredible service to reach underserved communities. We want to strengthen their capacity. The big banks are very much interested in big loans. They're not as interested in small loans. They're not as interested in going off track as to trying to accommodate the realities of those who have been left behind in the past, as this question infers. So we very much recognize that we have to build up banking institutions that will reach out in underserved communities. Number two, we also have to do direct loans and grants from the federal government so that you don't have to go through that type of bureaucracy with commercial banks. So the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program and Advanced Grant Program circumvented the disadvantages of having to go through traditional banking institutions. And in fact, it worked. We were able to get much better penetration to minority businesses through the EIDL program than we did through the 7(a) forgivable loan program. So we want to beef up those types of programs. I've already mentioned the emerging markets. We want the Office of Capital within the Small Business Administration to concentrate on emerging markets for venture capital. So we're not going to play the numbers game, but let me tell you, the numbers are really terrible. If you look at the traditional tools of the Small Business Administration, the 7(a) program, the 504 program, and look at how much goes to African-American businesses, it is just a horribly low percentage. And we need, but you look at what we did in regards to direct EIDL loans, if you look at what we did in the 7(a) Community Advantage program, if you look at what we did in the microloan programs, which are more targeted by direct participation by SBA, we did much better. So we have to have more of these direct programs where we can circumvent the traditional problems within the commercial sector that is discriminated against underserved communities. Doesn't mean we shouldn't be working with the banking institutions to change their procedures. We should, but that's a much more challenging prospect for us. And I know that my colleague in Virginia, Senator Warner, has been spending a lot of time to try to deal with that issue. I've worked with him, and I will continue to work with my friends on the Banking Committee to try to change the way that banks do these analyses that discriminate against underserved communities. And we intend to follow up on both the direct lending and grant side, as well as the changing the practices within the banking institutions.
Well, Senator, thank you for that. And I think that your response actually answered in large part the question that the 7th Lieutenant Governor and the former chair of the RNC, Mr. Steele, had. I was listening at your answers, and I'll be glad to report we're bipartisan here, so I'll be glad to report that you answered his question spot on.
Well, look, I want to be very responsive to Mike Steele. You know, we've had a really great relationship since the two of us ran against each other in 2006. We've become friends. So it's I'm glad that Mike is involved here. He's done a great deal for our community. We appreciate that.
Yes, sir. So we're going to go back to another longtime colleague of yours, and that's Mr. Rick Wade, the former Obama advisor. And his question is, Senator, you've been a longstanding advocate for minority and businesses. As the senior vice president of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, my question is, what mechanisms will be in place to ensure full participation of minority-owned businesses in rebuilding infrastructure? Minority-owned businesses can help build roads and bridges, as well as develop lands and go into areas that aren't as prominent, such as broadband, toll roads, and major utility projects like solar plants. How can the private sector and organizations like the U.S. Chamber of Commerce and BEA work with you to support these efforts?
Well, thanks for that question. The good news, we have leadership coming from the President of the United States in regards to this issue. It was the President who said that we're going to have a minimum of 10% of the contract work in regards to the infrastructure package going to minority minority businesses. So it was his commitment to make sure that we do this right. And we said earlier, we're not going to play a numbers game here. We're going to make sure we're really getting to the community that needs it. So I think you're going to have leadership from the President. I've talked to Secretary Buttigieg, for example, about this issue, Secretary of the Department of Transportation. He's very much committed to making sure that this is an inclusion process in regards to the contracts that are awarded. I certainly have talked to Administrator Guzman of the Small Business Administration. She's very much committed to this goal. The good news is that just about every key player in the Biden administration is committed to making sure this happens. So from the executive branch, I think you're going to find a much stronger attention to making sure we carry out this commitment that the President has made. And then I can assure you from the congressional oversight, we want strict oversight of all of the resources put out under the Build Back Better proposals, whether it's the infrastructure or the American Family Plan, the issues I've talked about opening up opportunity on affordable childcare, on affordable higher education, on paid family and medical leave, on pre-K age 3 and 4-year-olds. We want to make sure, and then we also have nutrition, we have housing. We want to make sure all those programs are carrying out its intended purpose at the end of the day. So oversight is going to be a major component of our responsibilities in Congress. It's not just passing laws, it's to make sure those laws are carried out the way we intended. And this is an opportunity, once in a generation opportunity to communities that have not been treated fairly in the past.
Senator, we have on the call many of our founders. These are admirals, generals, retired members of the Senior Executive Service. Brigadier General Velma von Richardson is a South Carolina native. She is a former executive in industry and one of our founders. So ma'am, over to you. If you all unmute General Richardson, she has a question for you, sir.
Senator, thank you so much for being with us today. The answers, responses to the former questions have been very enlightening and encouraging. My question, though, has to do with the part of the bill that affects or will include broadband. And I'm interested in just what do you expect that to entail? And how will small towns, I'm from a small town of less than 10,000, and rural counties be able to get on the list for being able to get that broadband into their communities as soon as possible?
Well, first, thank you so much for your service to our country. We very much appreciate that and your leadership. And thank you for that question. Broadband is a very high priority. Good news, it's bipartisan. There's both Democrats and Republicans strongly support the efforts to make sure that every single home in America has access to affordable, high-speed internet. Every home. And we know there are a lot of properties that are located in areas where it's not financially worthwhile for the internet provider to provide the service. So we have to make it economically viable for every home in America to have access. Now, it's true it's in rural communities, but it's also in urban communities. There isn't a single county in the state of Maryland that doesn't have challenges on access to high-speed, reliable internet. So it is a universal problem we have to get done. I'm proud that in the state of Maryland, during the Great Recession, when we had recovery funds, we were able to use that funds to put in what we call the internet superhighway, the broadband superhighway. We have all communities that can get access. We just now need the last mile connections. That can become very expensive. So we have multiple approach to this. we have an approach through the Department of Agriculture to reach the rural communities. That's been an existing program, and we put more money into that program, and we intend to have a special emphasis on rural America because of the economics of rural America, and the geography of rural America makes it more challenging for us to solve the issue of access to high-speed internet. So we have special programs, and we're going to put more money into those programs to deal with the rural community. We have programs under the FCC to deal with the affordability for those families who cannot afford high-speed internet service. And we're going to put more money into those programs. In total, the bipartisan bill puts in excess of $60 billion into broadband. That's a lot of money. So we're making a major down payment in the bipartisan infrastructure bill to fund all of these programs. So it's going to be direct funding. We've used in Maryland the Appalachian Regional Commission funding to deal with our rural part of our state in Western Maryland. We've used the Economic Development Administration, EDA funds, to deal with communities that have challenge as far as economic challenges. We'll use every tool we can possibly use to accomplish our goal, but our goal, to be clear, every family in America should have access to high-speed, reliable, affordable internet service.
Thank you so much for that response.
And General Richardson, your question dovetails right into our conversation with the scientists and researchers who are on this call. So we have Dr. Victor McCreary, and Dr. McCreary is the Vice Chair of the National Science Board, and he's also the Vice President of Research for the University of District of Columbia. He is joined by Ms. Veronica Nelson, who is the Executive Director of AMI, and they represent all of the ABET accredited engineering colleges, HBCU colleges in the country. So Dr. McCreary and Ms. Veronica Nelson, over to you both.
Senator Cardin, welcome. It's good. It's a pleasure to meet you again, and thank you for your time to come to STEM City. Appreciate your support of the infrastructure bill. And many people, when they think about infrastructure, they think about roads and bridges. But I also want to say, we have to also think about research infrastructure. And I want to give a shout out to you and your colleagues for support of the Endless Frontier Act. When we talk about R&D infrastructure and the talent and the challenge we face globally in terms of artificial intelligence and quantum information systems, where do you see the infrastructure bill helping out building research capacity in our emerging research HBCUs, particularly here in the DMV, my institution, University of District of Columbia, Virginia State University, Howard, Morgan State University, built as these become emerging research institutions, because also what they do is also develop this talent shortage and this STEM-based talent that we see going forward in order to meet these global competition. So how do you see also the infrastructure bill playing a role in that?
Well, Dr. McCreary, first of all, thank you for your leadership in our region. We very much appreciate everything that you have done. And I'm going to answer this in a couple different ways. During COVID-19, we had opportunities to invest in our schools, and we made a special effort to help the HBCUs. And this again was bipartisan. It was Democrats and Republicans working together to provide additional resources, recognizing that we had problems before COVID-19 that were made worse by COVID-19. So we did step up and provide some additional help. On college affordability, we have a special focus on HBCUs to make sure that a student should be able to attend a 4-year HBCU without going into debt. And we're working on that issue as well to really make college education affordable. And I've already mentioned on small business, where we're looking at partnerships with the HBCUs, recognizing that they have the best contacts to the underserved communities. So we are working on all those direct lines. But you're correct on research that we need to make a quantum increase in our investments and make sure the HBCUs are included in those efforts. And we have. If you look at, I can tell you, I'm very proud of the 4 HBCUs we have in Maryland. We have established science contacts and partnerships with our HBCUs and the Chesapeake Bay program. Morgan does an incredible job. Billy's doing a fantastic job in regards to so many different science-related issues. I could say that the same thing with UMES and with Coppin. So we have been really attuned to try to make sure that we have those individual partnerships. We've used the appropriation process. We're using now the earmark process. But as we look at increasing research, we have to make sure it's fairly allocated. So once again, as we looked at increasing infrastructure to make sure that minority contractors are included, we need to do the same thing on research to make sure that we're reaching those communities that have been not treated fairly in the past, to make sure that institutions are available so that the STEM programs in these institutions are as effective as they possibly can be. And it's great to be here in STEM City.
Well, I want to thank you. I have just one more question. I'd like to then turn it over to Veronica, but I also want to give out a shout out to NSF Director Setharaman Panchanathan, who has been a strong supporter of STTRs and SBIRs and trying to get that and put more money into our HBCUs and MSI. So I see him as a good ally for us going forward. You know, my second question when we talk about infrastructure is grid modernization, because as you can see, the onset of electrical vehicles, California has said by 2035, all vehicles will have to be electrical vehicles. Do you see also this bill as maybe also a great opportunity to increase what we call the skilled technical workforce? Those are those folks who are high school graduates, but do not have a bachelor's degree, but have STEM-based skills. And actually they comprise over half of our STEM-based workforce. Do you see that as an opportunity through this bill to encourage partnerships to develop grid modernization and bring in our HBCUs and community colleges?
Absolutely. First, let me tell you a challenge we have in America, and that is a workforce challenge. We need more workers in this country. We've seen a slowdown in the growth rate of population in America. Look at the challenges that we're having on getting people to work in our community. I mean, there's just not enough workers out there. We're finding business establishments that have to cut down their number of days of operation because they don't have workers. We see summer camps that are closing because they can't find workers. Now, part of it's the immigration policy. You know, we're paying a price for not having J1s here this summer for our seasonal workers, or paying a price on the H-2Bs and H-2As for not having adequate numbers in our community. And I hear that all the time. So part of it is that issue. But we have to make sure that we have the trained workers to deal with the needs that are out there. Now, I'll put a little plug in also for our criminal justice system. We've taken too many people out of our training. Our mayor just announced a program to deal with returning citizens. All that's an important part of making sure that we have a workforce that can meet the needs that we have out there. And by the way, these are going to be good paying jobs. With the changes in our energy policies and climate change agenda, President Biden's made climate change a top priority. So yes, there's going to be more opportunities dealing with the charging stations and alternative fuel stations, and the vehicles are going to be all electric. It's just a matter of time. They're more efficient, better for the environment, less maintenance, less costly. We're going to be using alternative fuel vehicles, and we now need to have the infrastructure to meet those needs. And quite frankly, we're just at the infancy stages of this industry. This is a great industry, and their technical skills are going to be desperately needed, and they're going to be great paying jobs. And we got to make sure that we get that job training available to our young people today.
There are good jobs that pay without a BA.
That's right. That's right.
Veronica.
Thank you. Well, Senator Cardin, I would say thank you very much for speaking with us today. And again, I'm Veronica Nelson, and I am the Executive Director of AMI, Advancing Minorities' Interests in Engineering. So we partner with corporations and government agencies and the 15 ABET accredited HBCU engineering programs. And so, as you know, 2 of them, Morgan State University and the University of Maryland Eastern Shore, are in Maryland. And so I want to ask a couple questions really to what Dr. McCrary mentioned. So we talked about HBCUs and research. We talked about broadband, which we know that's affected us, especially during COVID. Many of our students struggled in that area. And you talked a little bit about partnerships with HBCUs and incubators. And so my question is, you mentioned fair share. And so those are a lot of great things that are happening, but can you talk a little bit more about what processes and procedures will be put in place to make sure that we do get our fair share? And if there's any additional benefits that the HBCUs will be able to get out of the infrastructure bill?
Well, thanks for the question. And we have to work at every level. I want to give a shout out to my colleagues in the Maryland State Legislature that passed legislation resolving a long-standing court challenge, which are HBCUs in our state. And they did it in a very progressive way that's going to help all students in our state. But as you mentioned, the two engineering programs we have, they're very important programs to make sure that we have a workforce that reflects our population in engineering. So it's that type of making sure that we have the politics that is fair, that institutions that have not been treated fairly in the past are treated fairly moving forward. So it starts with that. Once you have that capacity, and I must tell you, I'm so proud of our HBCUs in Maryland. It's not difficult to be able to get partnerships that include our HBCUs, which gives incredible opportunity. I mean, go to our campuses in Maryland. These are active campuses with students in great STEM programs, and they're our leaders of the future. And so then to make sure that they get the resources. So this has been a particularly productive year in our state on our HBCUs, and we want to see this duplicated around the nation. And we're seeing major partnerships with federal agencies and with other academic institutions where they're partnering with the HBCUs to make sure the programs are reaching a fair intended market of future leaders. So we will be providing the resources to the HBCUs. I've already said that. We're going to be providing more resources for HBCUs. We're going to deal with the training dollars themselves to make sure they go in a fair manner. The research dollars go in a fair manner. So we'll be looking at what the fuelings of the different institutions are all about, but we'll be monitoring this pretty closely. And quite frankly, I must tell you, we have advocates in the minority community that are not shrinking violets. They're going to be out there very much working with us to make sure we do what's right.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Ms. Nelson. That's a wonderful question, and thank you for representing our HBCUs. Senator, I'm going to go now to some veterans who are on the call. Two of them, we heard from the general earlier, from General Richardson. I have two other veterans on the line. One is Brigadier General David Turner. He is a general from the Army Corps of Engineers, retired, and now a senior vice president with a company called Next Generation Logistics. And also we have Lieutenant General Bruce Crawford, U.S. Army retired, who is a senior vice president at Jacobs. And their questions relate to the bill itself, but also to veteran participation. So Brigadier General Turner, Dave, I'm going to go to you first, and then to Lieutenant General Crawford next.
Senator Cardin, good morning, and thanks so much for taking this opportunity to speak with us today. My question really centers around policy, and that is, what can policymakers and regulatory officials and agencies do to ensure that we are making the most of this investment, prioritizing the most transformative projects? For example, as Matt said, I'm a retired Brigadier General from the Army Corps of Engineers, and you're familiar with the process that the Corps uses to prioritize projects using benefit to cost ratio, environment, socioeconomic status. And I would tell you, a really good example I have is we were able to get a project approved when I was in the South Atlantic Division for Princeville, North Carolina, the first incorporated African-American community in the United States. Very low BCR, but due to the Assistant Secretary of the Army Civil Works adjusting the policy, we were able to get that project approved and funded based on socioeconomic status. And you spoke to some of this earlier, Senator, and definitely Veronica Nelson's question also got to this. So I'll be interested in hearing some of your perspectives on that. And again, thanks so very much.
Well, General, thank you for your service to our country. The Army Corps is one of my favorite agencies. Our local district is very responsive to our needs and has outstanding leadership. So thank you for your leadership. On this issue, you raise a very important point. I'm going to go back and do some work on this. The Maryland delegation has been very strong on getting consideration on Army Corps analysis of projects beyond just the narrow cost benefit ratio that they normally use to determine the feasibilities. So we've been able to get environmental considerations. So we have environmental restoration projects for our dredge material location sites, Poplar Island, now Mid-Bay, that we've been able to get approved. But if you used a traditional cost benefit ratio, it would not have been approved, because we recognize the value of environmental justice and environment. We should be doing the exact same thing in regards to underserved communities. And I will take that back to see how we can do it. I have some very similar Army Corps projects that are waiting to be funded in minority communities, and we've run into this problem. So I really do agree with you. I have been the key sponsor of trying to get our smaller communities funded under the Army Corps Backlog Project. But I think if we also put in there the social justice issues, we might be able to advance that. There's great interest among the Army Corps with additional funds coming their way to deal with the backlog in smaller communities. I'd like to see that prioritized for underserved communities. So I'll take that suggestion back and see whether we can help in that regard.
Hey, Senator, thanks so very much. And they can probably learn, because this is going to be a much more eclectic approach, and they could probably learn at a much broader level some of the processes that the Army Corps of Engineers uses to prioritize projects. So thanks so much.
Well, General Turner, thank you, sir. And Senator, we have a number of VIPs on the line. We have Rear Admiral Tony Watson. We have Rear Admiral Rashawn from the U.S. Coast Guard. We have General Johnny Wilson. And then we have our national chairman and my mentor, Vice Admiral Walt Davis. He runs an incubator in California, one of the largest incubators in California, with offices in San Diego, Orange County, and Silicon Valley. So we are a resource for you, sir. There are so many VIPs, not just from the African-American community, but also from the Hispanic community, the Asian American community, and really a cross-section of the country. So before I go to Lieutenant General Crawford, I have another fighter pilot on the line, Marco Cromartie. He runs the Port Authority out there in San Diego, so I want to recognize him. And is Calvin Butler, is Calvin on the line from Exelon? All right, Calvin is a huge supporter of ours out of Chicago, just a phenomenal leader and gentleman. So with that, I think I've recognized all of you, Sonia Kumar, children. We have some young people on the line as well. I know I have my three on the line, Matthew, Moria, and Margaret. But I'm going to go to Lieutenant General Crawford. Lieutenant General Crawford, as the Senior Vice President of Jacobs, what question do you have for the Senator?
Senator and everyone, it's good to see you again, sir. I always appreciated your visits when I was up at Aberdeen Proving Ground, commanding that great organization, probably about 4 or so years ago. So, sir, my question, it actually touches a piece of a lot of the discussion that we've been having. But it's essentially, given the amount of investment you've had there in the state of Maryland, you could argue from a cybersecurity perspective, there is no other state that's more, I say, strategically important to cybersecurity than the state of Maryland, given what we've got there. That said, my question has to do with the intersection of infrastructure and cybersecurity. So it touches workforce, pipeline, obviously the upskilling and reskilling discussion, HBCUs, et cetera, et cetera. That goes in a lot of directions, but so the reason I'm asking it has to do with the recent pipeline issue. So we don't talk about the pipeline issue, but I believe the pipeline issue brought the idea of cybersecurity literally into the hearts and minds of your average American who, although they understood cybersecurity a little bit, it had not yet affected them. So my question has to do with the intersection of cybersecurity, just your thoughts on it, and infrastructure, given just some of the recent events and the discussion here, sir.
Well, thank you. And again, thank you very much for your service. I want to thank all of our military that are on this call for their service to our country. I'm a strong supporter of all of our branches of service, and I treat them all equally, except one day a year during the Army-Navy game, where I am unabashedly for Navy, considering I'm a member of the Naval Academy Board of Visitors. But other than that, I treat you all totally equally. And thank you for mentioning the Cyber Command, which is located in the state of Maryland at Fort Meade. We are very proud of our location in the state and the institutions that we have, including some at the local government level. At NIST, we have some capacity, all in regards to cyber. So NSA, NIST, Cyber Command, we are very much in the forefront of the cyber issue. And you're exactly right. Cyber and transportation really do cross directly. The endless frontier that was mentioned, Bill, does deal also with the realities of the threats that we have from foreign actors. There's no question that we have hostile action from hostile governments. China's active, Russia's active, Iran's active, and we have to recognize that. But we also have activities from actors that are not quite as dangerous to us from the point of view of their game plan, but still disruptive of our security issues. And then we have the cyber thieves. They're just trying to steal things, including those that are trying to intimidate us through extortion. So we have a lot of challenges that are out there. The good news is that we have the best cybersecurity in the world. The bad news is that we are the #1 target around the world. So we really have to up our game. There has been tremendous resources put in at the federal level by Congress and by the administration. So I can assure you, I've been through some of the cyber briefings as to what we're doing. You mentioned the pipeline. There are a lot of other, we have to recognize that much of our, in fact, all of our transportation infrastructure is very dependent upon the cyber. So we have to be very protective. So in the infrastructure bill, substantial amount of resources are put in cybersecurity. And we've also provided some national help to our smaller companies to make sure they're as resilient as the larger companies. Although I must tell you, some of the biggest targets and some of the biggest problems have been our larger companies. And just last point on this, the reported cyber attacks are only a tip of the iceberg. So many companies have been attacked and they don't want to admit it and they don't talk about it. And they either pay the cost or they sort of hide it. So the vulnerability here is great. And we have to make sure that we're fully prepared, and Congress is stepping up to make sure the resources are there.
Sir,
Well,
thank
Senator,
you.
thank you for that response. And General, thank you for that question. You know, many of us are from HBCUs. I'm from Florida A&M, on the highest of Seven Hills in Tallahassee and others. So, sir, as we round out this last 7 minutes, I'm going to ask Ms. Veronica Nelson to ask the final question. I also want to recognize Mr. Darrell Pines. He's a leader in the HBCU community. He's on the call, sir, so we cannot go without recognizing him. But Veronica, we'd like you to close us out on behalf of the millions of Americans who matriculated through the HBCUs. We know that education is the cornerstone of progress to keep our country at the where it should be, as an exceptional place in the world, the best place in the world for anyone to come and to succeed. So Veronica, the last question over to you. And then Senator, once Veronica does that, if you and Dr. Taborn will close us out, we will end promptly at 11:30. So Veronica, here you go.
Thank you. And so I have to say that I am a proud graduate of Howard University. So again, very, very excited to represent the HBCUs on the call and across the country. And so the one thing I wanted to ask, and we've asked you multiple questions about HBCUs, but when we look at the bill, how would the bill affect the educational relationships with the HBCUs? Can you talk a little bit about that?
I'm not sure.
The one thing I want to say also, I'm sorry, Senator, you're doing amazing things in Maryland. And as you mentioned, there's advocates across the country. And so how can we make sure that what's happening in Maryland can continue to happen across the country?
Right. Thank you, Veronica. Thank you very much. And also, Matt, thank you for mentioning Dr. Pines. We are so proud of his leadership at Maryland. He is just a person who's leading our university in such a positive way for inclusion. So we're very proud of the mark that he's already made in his just short period of time under an extremely challenging circumstances of COVID-19. So in regards to what's in the bipartisan bill, the only thing that I can speak with any degree of certainty is the provisions that came out of our committee that I know is incorporated into the bipartisan bill. This is not a process I condone, the bipartisan process. I want to make that clear. I've been quoted accurately in the paper saying that they're making a lot of mistakes, and I think they are making a lot of mistakes. And we're going to have to correct that as we go forward, probably in reconciliation. I'm very much in support of the process moving forward because I want to make sure we, at the end of the day, we get a major major infrastructure bill done, and we need to move forward with President Biden's agenda of building back better. So I think it's an important building block to doing what is necessary and having this once in a generation opportunity. But we don't have the traditional way of making sure that the I's are dotted, the T's are crossed, and we're sensitive to these issues. So I don't know what will be in the bipartisan bill that specifically addresses HBCUs. I do know what's in the transportation and water bills that deal with economic justice issues, social justice issues, and deals with HBCUs. I know that what I've already referred to, I know that we're safe on that, but I don't know what's going to be in the overall bill. I do know this. In the reconciliation bill, there will be a strong component to deal with higher education and HBCUs. That is a commitment that President Biden has made, and the budget resolution that has been tentatively announced by the Democratic leadership includes those provisions. So we'll have a chance. Now, all you will see this next couple of weeks is the outline of that bill. That bill will then come to the Senate floor in the fall. So we'll have time to discuss and debate how we can best utilize the opportunity to strengthen the capacity and opportunities of the HBCUs and its students. So we'll have a chance to have a conversation about it, but I am optimistic that both the bipartisan bill and the reconciliation will provide tremendous opportunities for HBCUs and bridging the gaps that we have in our community. And Matt, with that, let me tell you, this has been a great discussion. I particularly will take back several of the points that you said, but I will check in regards to the Army Corps evaluation process. I think that's a strong point that was made, that we need to make progress in regards to minority communities. We certainly will be looking at the infrastructure bill and set asides to make sure it's not just a numbers game, but that we're reaching the businesses that have been left behind in the past, and that we're reaching out to get input before these decisions are made. And we will certainly be looking at accountability generally to make sure that what we say we're doing, at the end of the day, we do. I want to underscore why that's so important. I've been in this business for a long time, and this is a once in a generation opportunity to get it right. That we can make a quantum improvement as to our nation, which will benefit everyone here. We're being tested. Our system of government's being tested. Make no mistake about it, the Russians and others would love to see us fail. They're trying to tell their people that democracy doesn't work. We got to show that democracy does work, that the election results made a difference. And we are taking advantage of this opportunity to bring hope to families that have been left behind for way too long. And this is our moment. And I can tell you, I'm excited about it, and we'll do everything we can to make sure that we deliver.
Well, Senator, thank you, sir. Thank you very much. As we close, I'd like to thank the entire CCG family, Ms. Jean Hamilton, Dr. Anthony Jr., Dr. Crystal Bowman, and Vice Admiral Walt Davis, General Wilson, and others. I'd also like to, of course, go to Dr. Taborn, who is our founder and CEO, for the final remarks. Sir, you have 1 minute. Please close us out.
Senator Cardin, my friend, thank you for joining us here in STEM City, USA, and specifically in the Eugene DeLoatch Visitor Center. Dr. DeLoatch sends his love and his appreciation to all of us who continue to push this dream of promoting the pipeline in science and technology engineering. So thank you all for being part of this historic moment, being part of this STEM City Town Hall on infrastructure. Stick around. The best is yet to come as we move into phase 3 by the end of October. Jerome Stevens, Senator, you couldn't have brought on a better person. And I really appreciate his friendship and what he does in the community. Thank you. And everyone have a fantastic STEM City.